Welcome to the road to greatness. Get ready to be inspired and empowered to take your career to the next level. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the season 2 finale of The Road to Greatness. I'm your host, of course, Carlin Kiefer. And what a season it has been. I mean, the list of talent and fabulousness that exists in my network is beyond fascinating and fabulous. So we've had television personalities, sales executives, CEOs, coaches, leaders, mentors, and trying something a little different with AI and having AI as the guest in this. So it's been an incredible journey, and I'm excited to wrap things up by answering the one question that I am actually asked frequently, which is, when are you going to share your path? We know, and I preach it all the time, the importance of following the winding road to get to where you want to be. I have done that. And so finally I said, why not? So a couple of weeks ago, you might remember, I posted on all social media accounts to send me your questions. What can I answer for you about my path to greatness? So I'm putting the mic in your hands. And thankfully, some people actually did it. So I'm not sitting here talking to myself. And so let's get to the first question. Let's jump right in.
Hey, Carlin, it's Noelle. I want to know, when working with a client, what gets you the most excited?
Thanks, Noelle. That's such an easy question. The single greatest thing for me, and I would argue probably most trainers who love what they do, is watching the light bulbs come on. There is nothing better than having someone who's been at the sales game for as long as or their job, whatever that is, for as long as I've been at mine. And then they grumble about, oh, why should I have to go to this? I mean, help the newer people. I don't need any of this new stuff. I've been doing this for a really long time. But knowing the market changes, circumstances change, AI is changing everything. And so to watch them go through a session and slowly but surely have less grumbling, slowly but surely get more engaged, slowly but surely start taking some tips and tricks and then using them, but also because of their experience, they can also help some of the others who may not be as seasoned work and utilize the tools. So the customer cue card or the flip the script worksheet or any of the other things that we introduce to help people get better. I would also argue, though, being probably better than that to me is also having anyone who comes out of one of my sessions come back and say, you've helped me find my voice, or I feel more confident now, or I tried this thing, I leveraged the customer cue card, here's what I did, this is how it was able to move me faster through the process. Or the flip the script worksheet. So that's the worksheet that we give to help them plan and map out conversations so that they can deal with the unknown. They can plan for the unknown as best as possible and not get caught off guard at all. And so when they actually leverage that flip the script worksheet and tell me about it, tell me how it went, heaven, I am all about it.
Hi, Carlin. This is Gabrielle. Longtime listener, first time caller. Tell me, where do you find the energy?
I love the long-time listener, first-time caller. Thank you, Gabrielle. I can tell you where my energy doesn't come from. It does not come from coffee, tea, soda, caffeine, anything of the sort. Because ever since I graduated from college, I have been allergic to caffeine. Unbelievable, right? So here's the thing. I am a fully functional introvert who operates like an extrovert when I'm in front of a group. And I love, and much to the point of what I just said with Noelle's question, I absolutely love getting people energized and excited to learn, excited to improve their own pathway and their own success, excited to help people do their very best at whatever it is that they're doing. So whether they are in one of my sales workshops, management workshops, leadership workshops, and for the very few that I still do media training, those I love it. And I will say, even when I used to host, and I've hosted well over probably a dozen sales kickoffs in my time, and being on stage and announcing and doing all the things, After a good sales kickoff, I absolutely will go multiple days without speaking to anyone and love it. So that high energy that I have when I'm in public definitely comes at a price, and I absolutely will retreat back into my little shell for a day or two afterwards to reboot, regenerate, and get back going again. But while I'm in it, 100% all the time.
So let me ask you a question. So, as leaders, and as we look to go to fall upon our skills, our leadership skills pre-COVID, which involves a lot of one-on-one interaction, and we move into this new technology where there's more teams, there's more video conferences, less one-on-one interaction, and more face-to-face time like this. How do we evaluate talent? More importantly, how do we lead people without having that one-on-one interaction, without that handshake? So if you can give me a pro tip on that in terms of how do I lead my people through this newfangled technology called AI, and how do I as a leader adjust because it's not going away, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Wow, Wilder, talk about timing on that question. I actually recently had a conversation with my former guest, Wendy Petty, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at WorkFusion, and she and I were talking about the importance of AI in the sales function, in the role. And so I'll get to that one in a minute, but I want to take the first half of your question, which is how do you actually evaluate talent? In today's age of work teams being remote or hybrid teams, et cetera. And I get it. In 2025, people are coming back to the office, but there's still enough remote workers out there. There are still who are doing conference calls and meetings. So the managing remote teams, evaluating their talent is still something that we're all figuring out a little bit more. But there are some things that I absolutely will say are absolute musts. Number one, you have to be even more deliberate as a manager and a leader around coaching. So you actually need to schedule the time, make sure that there is formalized coaching time so that you can actually see. And when I say coaching, I mean drills. Don't just have them report out to you. I mean practice, role plays. Let me hear you say it. Give them scenarios and tell them, let me hear you say it. How would you communicate this to a customer or prospect or whomever? And not, well, I would probably do, no. Let me hear you actually say the words. So that's number one, being very deliberate about your coaching and making sure that you are providing opportunities for role plays and the like. I would also say communication is absolutely essential. Frequent, not micromanaging, but frequent, clear, and transparent communication. Don't leave anything up to the guess or assumption. And again, you don't need to shoot off and fire off an email every 35 seconds, but you want to make sure that everyone is always operating with the same set of expectations, the same understanding of the same goals, and what it is that we are in fact trying to achieve. So clear, frequent, and consistent communication is essential when you're trying to at least keep the talent informed, because that's also how they figure out what should I be working on, right? Because they want to know what your expectations are. And try really hard. I get it that some things come up from time to time, but try not to float those one-on-ones. I've heard clients talk to me about the fact that their manager has pushed them off for over a month and hasn't had a one-on-one conversation in over a month. Well, how are you aware of who's struggling, who's not, if you aren't checking in and at least having some kind of an interaction on a regular basis? And finally, I would say that their skills still matter. So just because you are remote or you mentioned AI, so AI is definitely a thing, but the fundamentals. So I say we teach the sales fundamentals, but we also incorporate the art of improv because we want to help people get more flexible and fluid when they are dealing with the unknown. Same thing, you still want to make sure that they understand whatever your line of work, and whether you are in go to market, whether you are in some other form of the organization, marketing, customer success, or anything else, wherever you are in an organization, you still need to understand what are the core fundamentals necessary to execute my job appropriately, and set up tests for that. That should be part of your talent reviews and talent assessments. Doing them once a year is a little bit too far off. They don't need to be done monthly, but I would say at minimum semi-annually. So you can actually chart out progress, set milestones, making sure that there is in fact growth happening even with your experienced teams. Now, let's get to the AI question because I love this. And there are a few things. One, you need to make sure on the AI front, as you said, it's not going away. It is absolutely here to stay. So let's make the most of it. So being aware of what AI tools are out there, what AI, and more importantly, if your business operates with some form of AI, so whether you're in process automation or you're a CRM or you are any other kind of a SaaS product or anything else, and AI is somehow built into the functionality of your product, your team needs to know what that is. How do we operate? How does it work? How do our customers use it? How should we be using it? Right? So there has to be some kind of a shared understanding, and it can't just be figure it out. You actually need to set up the opportunity to train them on what your product does and how it leverages AI. That's right off the top, and I don't feel like that's any shocking newsflash for anyone out there. The next piece of it is, though, what are the resources that you are in fact providing to your team? And let's take, because we operate so much in the sales space on the road to greatness, what tools are available to help your team become more effective and efficient in the sales process? Are there AI tools that can help write emails? Are there AI tools that can help set your cadences or flag leads? Find your ideal customer profile that are out there, and who can you be contacting? I happen to use a tool called Zoom Info when I'm looking at prospects and understanding who and what they are. And when I just go through the search of my ideal customer profile, I'm always stunned at the number of companies that are out there doing, that are just operating that I've never heard of, that are large in size, that fit the revenue stream, the company size, and everything else for my customer base. And so it's knowing how to get those on your radar so you don't have to go out looking for a needle in a haystack. What are the tools that can help make your sales team more productive and more effective? And then finally, as a manager and as a leader, and I cannot emphasize this enough, and actually Forbes did an article back in probably the start of November, I think it was, around how AI is now creating a different skill gap, not just not knowing how it works and not knowing what it is or how to use it and leverage it in your normal day to day, but it's creating a skill gap because people are actually becoming too reliant upon it. So I mentioned using it to help you write emails or set cadences or whatever, but if it's taking the thought and the critical thinking skills away from you, so that you're just letting the machines do all the things, you're forgetting how to create relationships. You're forgetting how to build that sustainable connection with prospects and customers, and prospects who give you a no for now, but leave the door open for you to come back later, or customers that you're hoping are going to renew. So they're not a one and done type of engagement. And so the typical skills and the skill gaps that come up as a result of too much leaning on AI, I would argue, again, relationship building, creating that connection, two, identifying what your customer values, so asking the right questions, three, pivoting in the meeting. So we all have had that moment where we're surprised by something. The customer comes back or the prospect comes back and says, hey, this changed. We got this new chief executive. We have this new thing that's happening, and you did not see that coming. Whether it was your fault, not your fault, you just didn't see it coming. And rather than being stuck with your mouth hanging on the floor, why not be able to pivot and understand how to work with the unknown? That is becoming a thing also with AI. In that same vein, for those who rely so much on scripts, they have to memorize their script. They have to go verbatim through all of the steps and everything else. One, I absolutely oppose memorization. If you can do it, fantastic. But I think that it robs you of the opportunity to be very, very present and listening in the moment and being able to capture your customer's value and what they want to value from the solution that you will provide. So it's great to understand, and you absolutely should understand the point, the purpose, the why, and everything else, but you should be able to communicate that in a way that feels comfortable for you and understandable to the prospect. Those are some big areas where AI starts to disrupt, in a bad way, disrupt your performance. And so it's really incumbent upon the managers and leaders to make sure that that good stuff is still sticking, right? The relationship building skills, the communication skills, the ability to pivot, the ability to ask great questions, listen to the answers, active, engaged listening, critical thinking, all of those things really important, especially in this time of the rise with AI.
Hi, Carlin. I definitely have a question for you. What would you say are the most important factors for enablement success? What are the parts and pieces that have to be in place? What are the teams that have to be able to work together to support each other? And what does a really good, strong, harmonious enablement function look like?
That's a lot. So much so that I had to put my glasses back on so I can see all the notes I wrote down while you were asking the question, Chaco. So thank you for that. Um, there are so many things that go into a really world-class sales enablement function and operation, but some of the things, and I'm not going in order because I couldn't write that quickly, but some of the things, number one, and I will say actually this is probably first and foremost, it's content. Making sure that the sales enablement team has the right content and relationship with all the appropriate SMEs, subject matter experts, who put the content together so that we can ask questions as needed as we're trying to build workshops, e-learnings, and whether it's gamifying or whatever it is that we're trying to build for the field. You need to have the best content possible in a form that is easy to understand, easy to translate and give back to the field, and easy to build training around, workshops, exercises, etc. Also, the full sales enablement team should have experience or at least knowledge of and understanding of the adult learning cycle. Learning, and if I can say this 1,000 times, it still won't be enough. Learning is not having someone stand at the front of the room and walk through a PowerPoint. That is not learning. That is providing exposure to content. Learning requires action. It requires being able to take in the information, digest it, process it, and then also be able to verbally apply it to whatever their work circumstances are so that they can actually see and make the connection to from the information to the action that they need to now take. So understanding that adults, you can go and have children recite all you want, and you can talk at children and have them just recite back to you, and that is how their brains process new information. Adults need to react to that information. They need to be able to answer questions or ask questions about that information. They need to be able to talk about it, learn from each other, bounce off of each other, and share what they're learning, how they would use it, take it out for a test ride, do those role plays. That's really important. If you tell the sales enablement function in your organization or even someone coming in, here are a few decks. Why aren't they learning them? Why can't my team recite this? Well, because they weren't taught that content. They were just given it to read. So really making sure that whatever the enablement function is, it is in fact interactive, and whether that's live instructor led or whether that is live and in person. If you do e-learning, because that is something that happens, make sure that it's not just watch these 3 videos and take the quiz. They, yes, will get all the questions right because they just watched it. But as soon as they turn off the class or course or turn off their computer, that information leaves them almost as fast as it went in, because there's not enough time and they don't get enough time to interact with the material. So that's why when I build workshops for my customers, I have pre-work that they do online. We work with that information when they're in class, and then they get post-work to reinforce what they learned. And then I also provide content to the managers so that they are able to reinforce what they covered in those workshops to keep them going moving forward. Which leads me to the next thing. Involved, engaged sales leaders. You show me a sales leader who actively coaches, who reinforces content, and actually uses the language of the material. So that is to say, when I use the customer cue cards, are you talking in that language? Are you talking about what does the customer value? What is the customer's solution that they want? What do they see? If you're using the right language, it will stay, because that which gets measured gets done, that which gets reinforced gets retained. And so, but if you show me someone who just says, hey, sales enablement team, can you all just handle that? I can guarantee their team is going to learn a lot slower and retain a lot less and probably perform a little bit lower. So engagement from the frontline sales leaders Absolutely critical. Internal relationships with the other learning teams in the organization. So if you work at a technology company, a software company, something of that nature, then you have probably a technical learning team who deals with all the software stuff. You have the sales enablement team. You might have the company training team that's working on leadership skills and overall professional development and such. Having that internal relationship where you can pull content from each other rather than reinventing, and risking or running the risk, I should say, of the different teams teaching things in different ways and different language, different lexicon, if you will, then you're probably going to have a little less consistency across an organization. But when there is that conversation, the partnership and collaboration, then it seems that things seem to come out with greater unity, with greater consistency. And if you've met me at any point in time, you know that I believe consistency is the foundation of trust. So if things aren't always changing and they aren't always different from what they heard in this corner versus this corner than in this corner, they trust what they're hearing is right and real and will adopt as necessary. The other thing, and this I have, oh goodness, if I could make this never ever happen in any organization ever in life, my life will be served. But your sales enablement team needs lead time, right? Your sales enablement team can't learn about the new offering, that the new opportunity, the new service, the new something at the same time as the general market. They should be learning about things well in advance of even the sales team, the go-to-market team, because they've got to build the content so that as soon as something does go to market, the sales team's already been trained. They're not trying to learn it while they're talking to the customer for their first time about it, or the customer reads a news a news article about it, and the press release or the announcement of some new service or an acquisition or something else, and then they go and they ask their rep about it on that same day or the next day, just because that's where the timing ended up being. And then your person can't actually answer the question. Sales enablement needs lead time to build it, to put it in place, and roll it out with enough time for the sales team to get their hands on it so that they are not caught mouth wide open, eyes wide open, going, I have no idea, right? You want to give everybody an opportunity to put their best foot forward at all times. And the other thing that I always appreciate is feedback. What is the feedback from the field about the programs that we're putting out, the content that we're putting out, the courses that we're putting out, even for your sales kickoff? What are those learning breakout sessions that are working? What are we doing well? What do you like about them? How are they useful? How are you using them? And then on the flip side, what's not working? What just fell flat? Don't just say, "Ugh, that didn't work," and so I'm just not telling them, and I'm just not going to do it. And I'm going to say something, because that's what pivoting is about. That's why you come back and iterate. Uh, if everyone got everything right on the first time around, wow, how amazing would that be? But that's just not normal. It's just not reality. So please provide feedback. It doesn't need to be mean or overly fluffy. Direct, clear, transparent feedback so that we can always make sure that the sales enablement team is putting forth the best possible content to ensure the success of the field.
Hey there. All right. So my question is, with all of your vast and successful experience in sales, in DEI, in leadership and communication and all of that, how did you come to choose your path with Pro Tip Partners? So like, what made you think this is it right here, what I'm providing? All right. That's my question.
Oh my goodness. If I wasn't tone deaf, I'd sing the song Every Day is a Winding Road, but I'll let you just sing that in your head and not blow out your eardrums. So how I ended up landing on Pro Tip Partners is an interesting spot. One thing I will say across my entire career is that every job I've ever had to do with communication, everything. And so, for those who don't know, I started out as a television news reporter trainee, moved to be a reporter, then became a weekend anchor, then became a 5 o'clock anchor. And so there was lots of talking. Those who also know me know I'm way too goofy, way too silly, and have way too much fun to really do well in local news, which thrives on the miserable. It thrives on bad news, and that's just not me. So, getting out of television, I went into media training. So I taught people who were being interviewed by the media how to answer tough questions, how to pivot when they didn't like the question, and how to get out of uncomfortable situations in the middle of an interview, whether it was live taped or anything in between, without it look like you were avoiding something. With that also adds in then executive communication, leadership communication, how to motivate and inspire teams and the like, because all of that really is an art form. It's both a skill and an art form. And I loved being able to do that with my clients at the time. So I began that here in DC with a small boutique firm here in DC. And then while working here, I was then asked, if I did all of these different things, as you mentioned, my DEI experience. So I'm the former first chief diversity officer for the United States Tennis Association. So for those who love professional tennis, go US Open. Um, but um, but if you boil down what my job actually entailed, it was training, it was communication training and communication, because we had to teach people who never had experience interacting with people who were different from themselves to be able to do that better. And for leaders to be able to motivate teams that were made up of people of different backgrounds, ethnicities, religions, you name it, all the things that flies under that DEI umbrella. Additionally, I would argue that I was also in part in sales there. I had to sell a whole organization that was not ready for diversity and inclusion. And they weren't ready to drop stereotypes, drop baggage, drop history to be able to successfully move forward. So that I used to always say, diversity and inclusion is always going from from the singles court to the doubles court. You're just making more room for more people. So um, they weren't ready for that, emotionally, structurally, anything. And so I had to sell the business case for diversity, why it mattered to the success of tennis, how it mattered to viewership for the US Open, how it mattered to membership and growing the USTA, how it mattered uh, for the longevity of the sport. And so that was my first sales idea. Then I had the greatest boss ever working for the USTA. When he retired, I decided it was also time for me to go. So then I decided to go out on my own and continue in the training as a consultant, continue doing the media training, the communication training, the DEI training, et cetera. But I was selling for myself. So sales role number two, I had to sell me to my customers. I ended up, and I was very proud of it by the time that it happened, I tripled my business year over year for the 4 years that I was in business. And so much so that actually in my last year of working for myself, the Washington Post, which is one of the primary newspapers here in the Washington, D.C. area, the Washington Post did a feature story on me right around the same time that the movie The King's Speech was out. And that actually did a lot to get me people who were dealing with speech anxiety. And actually did a lot of lead generation, I should say, for that time. Unfortunately, about less than a year later, I ended up with a parent who had some pretty significant health issues and health changes that required a lot more of my attention. And so if you've been an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, you know how hard it is. You have to do literally everything. And I couldn't do everything and take care of my dad. And make sure that, and I was flying back and forth to Atlanta every 3 weeks and doing a whole bunch of other things. And so it just became too much. And I was lucky enough that my last client, who asked me to come in and deliver a lot of their sales workshops for their sales kickoff, they loved the workshops. They liked the different feel, the different flavor, etc. And they said, "Would you like to stay?" And I said, yes, as timing would have it, this would be awesome. So my last client became my next employer, and I stayed with them for quite some time, but really dug into, and I ended up becoming one of their sales enablement team members. So onboarding salespeople, doing the continuous learning, still doing learning workshops for their sales kickoffs, et cetera. And then also on the infamous President's Club trip, I was then lucky enough to go so that I could lead the learning content, because you have to have learning content on a President's Club trip, but to lead the learning content on those trips. So that was a lot of fun, and gamifying, getting people excited to tackle the year ahead was just amazing and awesome. So I stuck with it. And then years went on, and after time passed, I was recruited by a technology company based in McLean, Virginia, or for others who know it as Tyson's Corner. And I was asked to build their sales enablement team and their sales enablement function. So it was establishing an onboarding team or an onboarding program, I should say, and then actually building the team. But we very rarely had time to do more continuous learning until the team got a little bit bigger. And so we got to spread out, got to do more, again, making world-class, I would argue, sales kickoff content, getting people excited, energized, and embracing the new offerings, new services, new expectations, new goals, and everything else as they kicked off the new year. It felt great and it feels great. And I actually had a friend of mine recently, Erin Lawler, told me a couple of weeks ago, she says, but you're a builder. You're supposed to build things. And she didn't mean obviously buildings or cars or machinery, because that would be wrong. Um, but I love to build programs, teams, content that is easy to take in and will actually shift or change one's path to success. And so when it was time and I felt like I needed a new change, I went out and developed Pro Tip Partners. I started, believe it or not, I started this podcast first while I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with Pro Tip Partners. So if you go back and listen to the early episodes, you won't hear or see a whole lot that's there. But it starts to come in a little bit more and more and more because I finally started putting some definitive lines around what all I was going to do. So I still boil down everything to communication, but I also, as much as everything is communication, I will argue to the moon and back, everything is sales. If you are not selling an idea, you are selling a product. If you're not selling a product, you're selling a service. If you're not selling a service, you're selling your credibility. You're selling your authenticity. You are selling something to someone all the time. And why wouldn't I want to help you do that? Why did I stick with sales and not go back to one of the other things? Money. And it's not that I think I'm making more money. I think that I really love helping people make money, because people who can take what you teach them and go out and make more money, they come back for the next big nugget. They come back for the next thing. They want to learn more. They want to do it. They get hungry for more. And I love working with hungry people. So, so I think that's it. But I figured out that in every job I've ever had, even in television, yes, it's communicating, but you're selling it. And my dad, who ran television stations for his entire television and radio stations for his entire career, always used to say the news department was the number one sales organization in the company, always at any television station, because they had to sell the teas, right? That's that 30-second thing at the top or the bottom of the hour, or right before you go to break from your favorite TV show and they're telling you new tonight at 11. And what are those verbal cues that get somebody to sit up and pay attention? It's all sales. It's all sales. So if you're going to come down and figure out where are you going, it's all sales. It's all sales and communication. And I will say a former colleague of mine, Pat McIntosh, also says that one of the big things is the communication around, or the communication skill and talent that I seem to have. And I embrace it because I know that that's one of my superpowers. And I'm just happy and thrilled that it works. And my clients find it helpful and useful. And they come back and tell me that they've made more money or closed a deal faster or feel more confident. And to me, that's a win.
Hey there, Carlin. It's Jaquetta. Okay, so questions. Now that you have lived and you've had a number of career changes, shifts, new starts, what have you learned about yourself when it comes to having to quickly shift into something unknown, uncharted? How well do you deal with change? And what have you learned that's made you better in your shift? And what are some of the things where you're like, I don't do this well. I need to work on this. Okay. We all want to hear it. We want to know. Okay, bye.
Okay, well, that's not fair. Um, you want me to expose all the dirty little secrets. Okay, so thanks, Jaquetta. First, let's take dealing with change. Dealing with change is something I've done my entire life. My father, as I mentioned, ran radio stations and television stations and happened to be the best at what he did. What that means is every time he got promoted, because this was long before remote work, every time he got promoted, he had to move. So, in essence, I then moved with the family every 3 years or so throughout my younger years. Now, when we got to Connecticut, which I was about 8 years old at the time, so when we got to Connecticut, he still moved. He went down for the TV station, moved over to radio, and then went back in a bigger position at the TV station for CBS at the time. And so that was the longest we'd ever lived anywhere, which was 8 years. And but every other time it was 3. He even moved my junior year of high school. He moved to Pennsylvania to take over the CBS affiliate in Philadelphia at the time, and I couldn't leave high school and my whole entire life and social stuff and all the drama. My senior year of high school and do it with strangers. So to my parents' credit, they allowed me to stay with a friend of theirs in Connecticut for my last year of high school. So I had to do a lot of growing up. I also had to learn a lot of things about being able to do things by yourself, deal with changes, deal with crises that you can't come home and scream at your parents. I'm living as a guest in someone else's house, so I can't be the crazy, moody teenager that I would have been if I were still living at home. So I guess that was a good thing. You never know. Anyway, so fast forward, there's college, and I said, and I'm never moving around. I hated it, blah, blah. But then I went into television as well, and then I moved after 2 years, and then moved again after 2 years, and then got out of TV, moved again after 4 years, again after 4 years. And so apparently this moving thing and having to pivot, reinvent yourself, start over, and as I mentioned in answering Kathy's question, changing angles of my career multiple times. So I think the only way to deal with change is to just keep putting change in front of yourself so that it's okay. How did that make me better? Well, I will tell you, I legit straight up hated it as a child. As an adult, I fully appreciate all that it provided because I don't get weirded out being the only person, not knowing anyone else in the room. I don't go and not do things because I don't have someone to go with. I've gone to concerts by myself. I go to movies all the time by myself. I can go to meals by myself. I can go watch sports in a sports bar by myself. I can go do any number of things and feel fully confident as if I had 20 friends with me or 5 friends or 2 friends with me. So that part, starting new jobs, getting myself into new and unknown places and spaces, not a big deal for me. But I think one of the things that a lot of people do is, and especially if they don't get out and about and move around and expose themselves to different things, they become afraid, and that fear becomes paralyzing. And it's, well, why risk? And there are so many people who say, what you want is on the other side of your comfort zone, and you grow through what you go through, right? So risk is part of the game. Risk is a part of the road to greatness for sure. And I can't tell you how many different people will say over and over again, failure is part of the journey. No one learns anything from success. They learn from the failures. They learn from what didn't work so they can refine and try again. So all of that moving, all of that turmoil, all the screaming and crying and whining as a child actually set me up for being okay with moving around and dealing with the unknown as an adult. Now, to the dirty little secret, what do I still need to work on? There are many things, but since you've only asked about work, thank you, and not other things, I think the thing I still need to work on is what I just said. So as comfortable as I am with different places and not being known, I actually still struggle, especially in solopreneurship, because you have to do all of the things, not just the stuff you're good at, not just the stuff you love, all of the things. So I am prospecting, selling, messaging, developing product, developing service. I'm invoicing, I'm writing proposals, I'm writing contracts. Well, not writing contracts, but I'm sending them out. I had a lawyer actually do the contracts. You should all do that, by the way. But I am, my own collections person. If someone doesn't pay, and again, okay, maybe I'm not. I actually get my 80-year-old mother to do that for me. Haha, fun fact. Um, so that I don't have to be the bad guy. Um, and and I still have to do the follow-up and the customer success piece. And I'm still developing online courses, right? You're doing all the things, not just the stuff you love. And sometimes that becomes overwhelming. Sometimes that is something where you sit and you say, gosh, but am I good enough to do this? Or gosh, can I do this right? And the answer is probably. And just keep doing it and keep trying. And so that's what I do. And so while there are definitely days, and I talk a lot about entrepreneurship and the fact that there are some days where you want to scream like Leonardo DiCaprio about being king of the world or queen of the world from the head of the ship. And then there are other days where you drive around DC going, what building can I jump off of? Not really, but you are just miserable because of the highs and lows of doing everything all by yourself. But there's growth in that. And I can see growth in me. I've only been at this for 5 months this time around. The number of things I do so much better in comparison to the last time around, the ramp time for me closing deals this time versus last time, the development of the business and the marketing of the business and everything else so much different because there's growth that happened between 2008 the first time and 2024 where I started the second time. So if you're thinking about taking some huge leap or trying something new, it's okay to wrestle with yourself and have moments of doubt, but then don't sit in it for too long. I think I saw that in a Medea movie somewhere. Don't sit in it for too long. You got to get back up and get through it. And that's what I continue to tell myself every day. But it's still a work in progress. I don't mind admitting that. And because nobody's perfect at it. So we're all just working on it and growing it together.
Hi, Carlin. This is Gabrielle. I'm absolutely blown away by your podcast guests thus far. What's your secret to nabbing such high profile talent?
So remember when I said it's always sales or everything is sales? Yeah, not this time. I am actually really, really lucky and fortunate to have an incredible network of successful, fabulous people. So starting from season 1, if you remember Josh Weiss, my negotiation expert, I've known Josh since I was literally 4 years old. I've known Ben Mankiewicz, as we talked about earlier this season. He was my mentor in television. Renee De Silva, CEO of the Health Management Academy. I used to work for her in sales enablement. Lee Child, best-selling author from season 1. Lee, I met him fangirling. I wrote him emails, loving all of his books, then started going to book signings, and then we ended up becoming friends. Thankfully, it was before stalkers were like a thing for people to be afraid of. So he didn't mind that I just kept showing up in all these places because I was such a huge super fan. And we're now friends. And Coach Rick Barnes, he and I have been friends for a long time. I did media training for him and his team when he was head men's basketball coach at the University of Texas. So I've had just a number of really incredible relationships that have turned into people to be guests here because they're amazing. And I want you to know how they became that way, what they recommend, what they suggest, and what tips you could pick up from them or me or both. So the 3 sales jobs that I did do to get guests on this podcast on the Road to Greatness, our first season 1 guest, Keisha Zoller. I actually was introduced to her by someone else because I was looking for someone who was an expert in improv who could really talk to me about how improv plays in business. And as we've talked about throughout this episode and in all the episodes, the ability to pivot, the ability to be resilient, the ability to deal comfortably with the unknown. And that's why we do the fundamentals of the skill. So sales or communication, presentation, leadership, management. we do the fundamentals there, but we also incorporate the improv training so that you can be more nimble and pivot as needed. So Keisha was my first unknown and also happened to be the first episode. I also went to the Boxing Hall of Fame ceremony, induction ceremony, where Jackie Callan was being inducted earlier this year. And I followed her around a little bit and asked her if she would be a guest on my podcast, and she graciously accepted. And so, and the fact that that actually worked out, you couldn't have been more surprised than me because I was so random to her, but it worked out wonderfully. If you didn't listen to that episode, talk about someone who is 1,000% fearless. That's the one. Talk about someone who will put themselves out there and is always looking for the next new thing and the way to change and being able to adapt in any situation. Holy cow, she's amazing at that. My third was earlier this season, Wendy Petty, who is the Chief Revenue Officer for WorkFusion. I follow Wendy on LinkedIn, all of her posts, and the interviews that she has done. I found her to be exceptional as a leader, as a pioneer, and a front runner for. I talk a lot about the importance of having leaders who reinforce training, believe in continuous learning. She is that in a nutshell. And she's someone who stretches boundaries and pushes the envelope, and she looks to get the best out of everyone, and she's tough and successful, and I love that. So you should definitely check that episode out as well. But those are the only 3 sales jobs I had to do to get guests on the show. Everyone else, it was a little bit of begging and a little bit of, oh, come on, we've been friends forever. Please do this. And so they've indulged me and done that. And so to those guests, to all the guests, I thank you very, very, very much, because you've made 2 fantastic seasons of The Road to Greatness.
So actually, the question I wanted to ask you, Carlin, was what gave you the courage to step out on your own? You've always been a very outgoing person. You come across as extremely confident and energetic, and people are just always attracted to your energy. And when you decided to go out on your own and do what you're doing now, what made you do that? It's a scary thought, I think, to go out on your own, put faith in yourself. Like, what gave you the courage to do it?
3 very simple words: do it scared. That has become my motto over the last couple of years. And so this kind of dovetails a little bit around what Kathy asked in terms of the path to do Pro Tip Partners. That was more the steps and how it progressed and how it evolved. The courage to jump and go out on your own, you just got to do it scared. And I will also add to that, Steve Harvey, the comedian, as many of you probably have heard of him in some way, shape, or form. But Steve Harvey, in some interview that I saw a long time ago, talked about success. And the only way to truly be successful is to not have a plan B. Because if you have a plan B, it's okay to give yourself a break and fall down and quit. If you have a plan B, you can settle for something that wasn't what you wanted. If you have a plan B, you can default to something else and give yourself permission to do that, and it's okay. If you have no plan B, if it's do this or bust, do this, be broke, do this, be whatever, you will figure it out. You will keep getting yourself back up and do it over and over and over again. And I could list for you the number of mistakes that I've made this time, last time, or any time on any day, because I'm nowhere near perfect. But the courage comes from acknowledging that the fear is there and doing it anyway. It's just a matter of, do you want it? And are you clear on what you want? If you're not clear, don't jump. But if you're clear on what you want, jump. And because my husband and I watch Batman, The Dark Knight Rises over and over and over again, one of the scenes that we quote back all the time to each other, hopefully y'all will go out and watch the movie, but one of the scenes we quote back all the time is when Christian Bale is trying to get out of the pit. And the old man is telling him about the child who made the climb, the child who was successful. And he's like, I don't understand. I keep trying. I keep jumping. And I'm not afraid of dying and this, that, and the other. And he said, you need to do the jump like the child without the rope. And so without the rope, there is no plan B. You have to be so ready that there is no plan B, because then you're going to give it 1000%. 1000% of your energy and effort. So if you're thinking about doing something on your own and you're thinking, can I make this? First, make sure it's the right thing for you. Second, make sure that you do have some means of supporting yourself in the process. But third, if you're going to make the jump without the rope. I didn't do the accent justice, but go see the movie. Batman, Dark Knight Rises.
This next question comes from the podcast Facebook page. Katie O'Halloran asks, what was your biggest challenges in leaving your day job and starting the Road to Greatness podcast? Was there anything you found easier than you expected in developing the Road to Greatness?
Okay, first, let me acknowledge the elephant in the room. Yes, that was an AI voice reading the question from the Facebook page, but Katie did submit that. You can check it out on the Facebook page. All right, so what did I find most challenging about leaving my real day job? Honestly, the hardest part is leaving the people. I had a great team of 10, very talented, experienced trainers. We had a chemistry that was incredible. And I would argue in my 25 years in working in business, not in television, working in business, that is by far my favorite team in terms of the collective personalities, talent, chemistry, the way we all support and helped each other, et cetera. That was the hardest part, leaving a team environment, collaboration. I still have a flip chart in my house where I can do all my brainstorming, but it's still just me brainstorming. And sometimes, it'd be nice to have someone say, no, that's a dumb idea, or that's a fabulous idea, or you know what, I've got an idea, and have it be their idea. So those are the hardest things. What was the easiest part of starting the Road to Greatness podcast? I think what was easier than I thought it was going to be. Number one, as I mentioned earlier with Gabby's question around getting the talent, I actually thought it would be harder to get the folks that I know to participate. They're all very busy. They are all leading their own great teams, path businesses, et cetera. So the fact that so many people agreed to be on the show, I am enormously flattered. I am just grateful beyond all get out, because not only do I just enjoy this, I enjoy having great conversations. I enjoy learning things from other people and sharing that knowledge with others. So there's a true joy in that. But I will also say that, and I mentioned, I think earlier, around the fact that I started the Road to Greatness podcast before launching Pro Tip Partners. I actually focused all of my energy on the podcast, right down from getting the logo, the graphics. If you don't see us on YouTube, you should definitely check out the YouTube channel so you can actually see what everybody looks like and not just hear them. When I left the day job, I was trying to just exit and was trying to press the reset button, close some doors, close some books, start new chapters, start new books, literally and figuratively. And so for me, it was just jumping right into it. It was almost like getting back into the TV game. It was almost like riding a bicycle or getting back into a flow that it felt like I never left. So having the conversations were really good, and doing the podcast was, like I said, getting the guests, that was easier than I expected, way easier than expected, because I expected it to be really painful and hard for lots of people. And then the joy of being able to do this allowed me to refocus. And so going back to Kathy's question earlier around what got me to pick sales enablement as my focus, this podcast helped me find that. Hearing how many people, and if you've listened to all the episodes, we've got people of all backgrounds, all walks of life, all of everything, and with different experiences, but their core around how they became great at what they do was all the same. It was all about resilience. It was all about pivot. It was getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and all of those things. So that's, again, why I try to bake that into the workshops that we deliver, the learning programs that we do, because that is the thing, that special sauce that gets people moving to the next level. So this just got my mojo back, my juices back, got me ready to get back to the classroom and to the training, and developing programs and everything else. So, yeah, that was the part that was easier than I thought and better than I expected, that this was going to lead me back to where I was. So again, I would like to say thank you to everyone who submitted a question. If you would like to submit questions, by all means, for season 3, please do. You can visit the Facebook page. That's probably the one that gets updated the most. You can go to Carlin RTG Podcast on Facebook and look at the podcast, and you can submit questions there. You can do them on YouTube after an episode. And if I typically, as you know, I close out all of my interviews with the question, what didn't I ask that I should have? And so since everybody else was in control of asking the questions, here's the question that I wish someone had asked. What do you want from your listeners moving forward for season 3 of The Road to Greatness? So glad you asked, Carlin. Thank you very much, Carlin. So what I would like for all of you is I would love to hear actually back from you. I would love to hear if something stood out for you that you liked or appreciated or thought was amazing. Tell me so. Submit that. Again, on the Facebook page or the YouTube channel. Tell me what you liked, because we'll do more of it. If you have questions that you want to ask a guest, you think there are questions I should be asking the guests, tell me what those are. And if you have guests who fit the profile of being great at what they do, they know how to pivot, they are interested in helping other people be great at what they do, please make recommendations. Whether you know them, don't know them, I have no problem. I've sold myself 3 times for the podcast. I can do it again. So whether you know them or don't know them, I would love to hear more around who you'd like to hear from in the Road to Greatness, and what you'd like to hear us talk about. Okay, so that would be something that I wish to ask of all of you. And with that, I will say thank you for 2 fabulous seasons. We've made it above 1,000 downloads, which is fantastic. It's way more than I thought I would have when I started the podcast, because this was my hobby and it was my thing to just get me back in a flow. But it's turning out that it is growing, and it's interesting to others. So please share if you like this episode. If you have something that I can help you with, or you have questions of me, you can always just find me either on ProTipPartners.com. You can find me on the podcast website or the podcast Facebook page or YouTube channel. You can ask questions there, but I'm easy to find. I'm all over the place. So just Google Carlin Kiefer, find me on LinkedIn, whatever you'd like. It has been my absolute pleasure to bring you fantastic people, fantastic interviews, great insights, fabulous lessons on leadership, sales, retention, outreach, confidence, any of the things, communication in general, negotiation. We had a session on AI, and we had talked about that a little bit today, but there's a whole episode on AI from season 1 if you haven't had a chance to listen to that. With that, I say I thank you. I bid you farewell. We are now in December, so we're heading into the holidays. I wish everyone a very happy holiday season. Don't eat too much, and if you do, just remember to get out and walk it off later. Sweatpants are your friend, at least for the next 2 weeks. And with that, I say thank you. Have a fantastic new year on purpose. Be absolutely fabulous and find your road to greatness in 2025. Thank you. Did you hear something you liked? Tell me about it at Carlin RTG Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Thanks for joining.